Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhoads on the Buy Here Pay Here Morning Show. Take it away, you two.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
We were a little bit late because it's internet problems and the board and all that. So we're not on headphones and everything. So let us know if you're having any problems.
We finally had to give up. So,
yeah.
Just make sure you're hearing us on audio. So
Happy Monday.
Yeah.
All of you guys are out there in Indianapolis. Hello.
Right.
Hope you guys are going to have a great conference. You're already in a couple hours. So.
Yeah, I don't remember what starts on Monday. I don't remember their agenda, but I'm sure there are plenty of people already there. So.
Yeah.
And only announcements for this week, we have Amanda and or Hugo Sanchez is planning to join us on Friday to talk about RFCs. For those of you who don't have one, we'll cover both sides of that. If I don't have one, should I have one? And if I do have one, what kind of last minute adjustments should I be making at the end of the year? Is it time to relook at my discount rate and some of those kind of things? That's part of what we'll be covering on Friday. So we're just waiting for confirmation from them, but it looks like that's the game plan for Friday. So
I had my name spelled wrong.
Yeah, I should do that a while back too. I didn't point it out. I didn't want to embarrass you.
Michelle. Okay. But yeah, happy Monday. And we had a great weekend. I went and spent the weekend with my brothers in Twin Falls and did some hiking and some other fun stuff. So it was a good weekend. And Jim stayed home and managed to eat things other than corn dogs and wedding cake.
As far as you know.
Yeah. He didn't post anything.
Yeah.
So,
not everybody's interested in my eating habits.
All right.
Do we have audio verification? Oh,
yeah, I think so.
Sounds good. Okay.
Excellent.
So we can jump into the stuff. I think for today, what we had in mind to do was to talk about some comparative numbers. And I find, I'm a numbers guy, right? And so I work with numbers, and we work with a number of dealers with numbers. And I find that a number that matters to one dealer might not matter to another. So I'm just really trying to always focus on the ratios and KPIs that I think are going to be most useful to any dealer, regardless of their stage of business, regardless of their size of their business, volume, et cetera. And so I picked one today that I think, when I present numbers, I try to do exactly that, just present the numbers. Like, I'm not necessarily advocating for a business model. People will have different strategies and different ideas about how they want to conduct business and what's important to them. We've heard, we had an example of a conversation not long ago where, one dealer's thinking, I'm okay with a longer term and more interest income, and others say, I want the note as short as possible. I want the money in the bank as soon as possible. As an example, just, people have different
lots
ideas.
And lots of different business models.
Yeah. So I think that what I wanted to share today was just these are actual numbers from 6 dealers on a slide side by side. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are 5 states represented in the slide that I'm about to show you. So it's
pretty broad.
Yeah, it's pretty broad. And the numbers, have some deviation. But if you want to share that on the screen here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can go ahead and get that up there, and I'll start. So for those of you listening by audio, I'll try to talk through it as specifically as possible. So what you're seeing is risk or cash and deal as a percentage of the loan term. So let me kind of break those down. The risk, or what's often called cash and deal, sometimes called exposure, would be the actual cash tied up in the contract after down payment. So an example would be if you own a car for $6,000, including recon, and you get a $1,500 down payment, that would be $4,500 of cash and deal. Okay, so that's what we're measuring. And then we look at, let's look at that number as a percentage of the total term. So I think in this one, I did the math based on, what in a 20 group would be called, we used to call it weeks to break out. They now probably call it months to break out. That's how long would it take for your customer to pay off or break you out of your risk at their payment amount. So in this case, it doesn't matter whether we do dollars or term, it's going to work out the same, or, in terms of payment amount, whatever. But what this is looking at, let me just pick that first one. So dealer number 1 on this slide is 31.2%.
What does that mean?
It means that the dealer's risk period in the contract is running 31% of the total term. In other words, they have to collect 31% of all the payments.
What I'm seeing here is that it's basically, this is weeks to, okay, never mind.
Yeah, so it's like, it doesn't matter whether you're
Mhm.
looking at dollars or months or
Mhm.
whatever. It's really just looking at the total term.
Mhm.
So this would be true whether it doesn't matter whether you've got a 24-month term or a 48-month term. It's basically just saying that dealer number 1, their total risk in the contract, put it another way, they would have to collect 31% of the payments in order to break out of their risk, and the rest would be profit. But that's, we also look at this sometimes just on the markup of the car. This one is a little different because it factors in the interest income. So this obviously assumes that the customer were to pay, or that this is based on all sales for these dealers in the month of October. So it's basically saying, dealer number 1 would have to collect 31% of their payments in order to break out of their risk, and the rest would be profit. So you can see the numbers vary a little bit. This dealer number 4 over here is at 25%. They only have to collect,
a quarter
25%
of the note.
Of the note. So obviously we don't know the length of the contract in this case, but you just have to ask yourself, is this a valid number?
Can you again walk us through how you get to this?
I'm taking basically the total length of the contract. Let's say it's 42 months in total term. So 31% of that term would be the risk. So that's that number of payments in terms of, and I've got those numbers. I didn't bring them today, but or I didn't expect to present them today. Basically, we can go into more detail. I think you'll see this kind of math class be a theme for us going forward. We want to start to break down some terminology, because I just find that, with these 6 dealers, when we're talking to them, I just find that they, even as experienced as many of them are, they also require clarification of what we're looking at. And some of them look at it and think, I don't know that that's a number that matters to me. Like, it's not necessarily relevant to the way that I manage my business. And that's okay. Like, it's just numbers, but it's a question of whether or not some will look at that and draw conclusions. Some will now look at that and go back and run their own numbers and say, my gosh, my numbers are, 50% or whatever. And so it's real comparative information. It's saying these are real dealers in 5 states.
And ones that have been in business for decades to a year.
Some as few as a couple of years, I think was the fewest, but or the shortest time period. But the reality is, it's just loan structure. And once this customer is contracted at that term and at that down payment, then this is the contract that we're stuck with, if you will, or this batch of contracts. These are all the contracts that we originated in October. So, that dealer over there on the far right, who's 35%, they can't go back and say, I want to improve that number. It's too late. The customer's under contract
for that batch, but they
batch.
can for the next month.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my point.
I see a bit of value in like running that monthly by batch, and it's like, because that'll tell you an awful lot about how you're buying, about how you're setting up your deal structure. I mean, there's a lot that, and these are the kind of numbers.
Sure. And these are the kind of numbers that are going to show up. Maybe they don't measure this exact ratio, but this would be something that dealers would see in a 20 group. But we also know just that, the reality is there's going to be a very small percentage of dealers who decide that a 20 group is for them. And so really what we're trying to do is say that, look, if you're not in a 20 group and you don't have a good way to have comparative information, then here's something as a point of reference. It's just something to be able to see.
Tyler asked what the dollar amount spread is from 25.3 to 35.
It would vary a lot, Tyler. I mean, because for example, the dealer number 6 over there, they may have a $10,000 ACV, and dealer number 4 might have a $5,000 ACV. So the actual dollar amounts, again, I didn't come today to talk about dollar amounts, and I think we want to keep it to ratios for this conversation. It's really just about thinking in terms of how far do I have to collect? Another way to look at this would be months to break out. It's an interesting number. To some, it might seem arbitrary, but it's like, how many months do I have to collect before I have recouped my risk in the contract? Right. So that's why I like to look at that. And this is just something similar, but in a ratio to the total contract length. So let me show another slide that's kind of the same thing. This one is going to be similar. It's just I took the same basic information and I inverted it to thinking of it this way. Dealer number one is at $2.20, which means for every dollar of risk that dealer is taking on the contracts in October, they have the potential to enjoy $2.20 of profit. That's going to be gross profit on the markup plus the interest income if all the October customers paid all the way to term.
And
would be another way to say
okay.
That. Okay. So that's why we're just saying, look, it's just math. It's just numbers. We're just showing you the numbers and you can draw your own conclusions about what that means in terms of, but another way that I talk about this, so and Tyler, I see your questions there. We can definitely, I can send you the actual numbers. We just, we're obviously not going to share from a confidentiality standpoint. We're not going to share who the dealers are or where they are, but I can share with you the raw information behind, these numbers that you're seeing in terms of cost of car. I would say they're pretty consistent. That dealer in number 4 right there that has the highest bar, that dealer does have a lower cost of car, and that's part of why you're seeing that. But it just begs the question, okay, well, if dealer over there is enjoying roughly $3 of potential profit per risk, per dollar of risk, then instead of $2, should we all be looking at a lower cost of car? Well, for some that is appropriate strategy. For others, that may not be the direction they're going. But I think, again, it starts with just having the information, having the numbers so that you can draw your own conclusion and see what others are doing. And so that's what I really wanted to bring today, with some real numbers that show some real values.
I like that. And we see all the time on social media when someone will ask a question about what do you do, what's your numbers for X, or what do you charge for Y, or whatever. And the nice thing about what it is that we're trying to do here is this is more, it's based on some numbers that we can back up.
Yeah, for sure. These are real numbers sourced, from Dealers DMS. And so we've got, you've got some real validity to what's going on here. That doesn't mean that everybody should adopt the business model that results in $2.96 of profit, potential profit per risk. It's just like I say, there are other factors to consider. But I think the main thing is to be able to share. And one of the things I've enjoyed doing, I'm challenging, folks out there in our industry who talk on Facebook, which we almost all end up in conversations around these Facebook threads and in Facebook groups. I'm just challenging everyone to be as specific as possible.
That's
and so that's what I'm really,
So
that's what we're doing here, is we're just simply saying, these are real numbers relative to, real ratios. And so we're just trying to get more specific so that people can see and better understand, what's happening there. And I think, we'll plan to bring more numbers. We can pull that down. I think we can bring more numbers in the weeks to come, because I think this is what I'm seeing, is that this is what dealers are kind of hungry for. They're out there asking questions all the time. We see it on social media, asking this and that. And so we just see that, they don't have good access to information, good comparative information, that is. So look for us to do more of the same of this.
Yeah. And it is kind of, it's a struggle when you see, someone will ask a question and then you just get a crud load of information that may or may not be validated. And is it's a lot of it is based on opinion. It's based on there's so many different ways of structuring a deal and business models and all of that. And so, we try to throw out all the stuff that's irrelevant and come up with some good numbers.
Well, and I think the reality is you also sometimes in those threads, you get people speaking up and offering suggestions when they don't have any more experience than the person, that is asking the question. And they also, I think it's just like the numbers we're looking at today. You can look at those and say, okay, so it looks like I should at least have $2 of potential gross profit for every dollar of risk. What you don't know is how are those contracts performing, right? That's the thing we all have in buy here, pay here to deal with. Yeah. Just because it's structured well doesn't mean, but I think it's like the reason I make the comment about you can't change the numbers once October's contracts are, because if assuming that they all collected as well, like they all performed as well in their collection departments, then obviously some dealers have the potential for more profit. It just, that's the math. That's the reality. It's what you're seeing in those slides.
Well, and that potential though is once this deal is booked, that potential then lays in collections.
Right.
Completely.
Right.
So, that's like a whole nother factor to what it is that these are the months till risk, the months till breakout and all of that. But if I think we've talked last week, we talked a bit about, it's great to find great salespeople, but collections in this business is where it's at. And so I'm sure that there's some other things that we're going to be talking about we've talked about collection efficiency and those kind of things, but that's the big thing is so now go out and collect.
Yeah. So, there's one of the beautiful things about our work, and the reason we're not going to run out of stuff to talk about is like, there's so many layers to this. There's obviously there's underwriting and there's the sales and the pricing and the deal structure, and then there's underwriting and deal structure might be part of that. And then there's the collections element. So I think, but really what we're trying to do is let's break it down one piece at a time. And we're basically saying, if they all experience the same repo rate, they all experience repos that happened at about a year or whatever that looks like. The reality is some are taking more risk than others. So that if we learn anything from the slide we just looked at, some are taking more risk than others to generate that potential profit. So, regardless of what, this doesn't factor in operating expenses, the costs behind producing those contracts, any of that stuff. It doesn't factor in any of that. It just looks at the deal is structured in a way that it's got a certain amount of profit in it relative to risk. And so now we just have to focus again on the collection.
Well, let me ask you, that the numbers that you've got range, we looked at the percentages and it was, the lowest was 25 and the highest was 35. Does that also take into account like the term? I mean, it's like, because sometimes you're going to scrunch up and have a higher payment. And so it's,
it does. What this did was use the actual term of the loans in the pool. So the pool would be in October. So we took all sales in the month of October. We took the term of loan on those sales, and then we calculated the risk in those contracts and said the risk as a percentage of the total term of all contracts. So if you take the average term of all contracts, so I think we used averages, but if you use the average term of all contracts and you use the average cash and deal, that's how those percentages.
So what I'm kind of thinking and what I'm seeing is that there are a few different things needles that can be moved. One is buying, the amount that you're buying the car for. One is the payment, because if you've got a higher payment, then there's a chance that you're going to break out faster.
Right.
But then that has a whole nother thing with PTI and what was the other thing?
Well, your levers are basically like you touched on. One would be cost of car. Because that's the buying side you're talking about. The other would be down payment.
Okay.
And or trade, right? So more down payment is going to improve these ratios. And then the payment amount, but also just the asking price, the selling price of the car.
Yeah.
So we don't know. You could run the price up potentially and move these numbers, but is that the wise thing to do? Is the account going to perform well? Well, there's a lot of variables in that answer, like depends on the miles of the car and a lot of factors there. But, we're just basically, I think when I see these kind of numbers, I always think the same thing. You can move those levers that you're talking about, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't fit well for the customer and the car won't perform to the length of the term that we're talking about, then it doesn't matter what these numbers look like, because that money's not going to end up in the bank anyway, right? So it's like so there's a lot of variables here, and that's why I say in our line of work, it's the nature of what we do. It's beautiful. We have flexibility in it, but I think none of us is looking to be in a business where we have a lot of potential profit, but we're charging off a lot and we never enjoy that profit. Like what do we gain from that? By putting, one of the things we gain is a big income tax bill, because we could put a lot of profit out there that we didn't really collect, and we never really were going to collect. And so we end up being taxed on our income accordingly. So,
so I'm just, I'm kind of like, if you were a dealer that's looking at these and seeing the different spread, is there a place that you could say this is a good place to break out that 20? How much of the contract is gone through before you start to experience profit?
I can bring that number back next time. My memory from these numbers was that I think the average with the dealers in this particular group was about 10 months. So, there were some that were over 12, but I think the shortest was around 8. You're talking to a dealer. When I was a dealer,
so that percentage was like so what you're saying is that if the months to break out, the one that had the 25%, that they were breaking out after about 8 months.
Correct.
Okay.
But I think the number across that group would probably be, the numbers are more like in that 25% number that we saw, you're probably like 8 months of breakout, and about whatever that would be, it'd be about 4 times that would be 32 months of term. So shorter, lower ACV, shorter term. But I think the more common one was in the range of, 12 months and about 30 to 32 months of term, something like that. So, we can bring those numbers back and get more specific. It just always makes me uncomfortable talking about numbers in a general way. I'd rather show them quite specifically. So we'll come back with those numbers and show you in more detail as we go forward. But yeah, business models vary. I always say that. Look, just because these numbers look like this doesn't mean you should move your business model. Everybody's strategy around their business model can vary. I just think this helps to just have a point of reference, to know what's possible, to know what other people are doing, because we meet a lot of dealers. We're working with some this week that are just new to it. They don't know where to start. They don't know where to price a car and what to expect in terms of loan performance. So this is why we do it.
And then when we get those questions, we're gonna kind of take it circle to White Hat Way. It's like, well, how do you want to price it? Well, how do you want to be known in your community? How well do you want the success of your customer? Because the higher success rate of your customer, the better known you're going to be in your community.
You want a lot of profit on your P&L next month? Mark the cars up more. You want better loan performance over the duration? Mark them up less. It's like there's just a lot of things to factor in there. So nobody likes to hear the answer, it depends, but we definitely know that a lot of the things that we're talking about here tie back to to all those things about how do you want to be known? How do you want your portfolio to perform? And how much work do you want to put on your collectors? And just a whole lot of stuff there. But anyway, we should wrap up there. I think we covered it.
Do you think we covered it? Well, I don't have any outro music today. I don't, because they're not connected to this at all.
Oh, we can't
That's
play it inside
right.
there. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of
Do
screwy.
you want to sing us off then? Just sing a little song.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll start.
Thanks
Christmas
so much,
music
guys, for joining, and we will see you on Wednesday for our White Hat Wednesday. Have a great day, everybody.
See ya.
Enjoy your Monday.